It's been scientifically discovered now, a gene put into us for worship, as well as chromosome number 2 being taken out and fused together, and 2 telomere caps being put on each end to shorten our lifespans.
This story shows up in antiquity in many different cultures.
Yeah.
At one time, I used to feel that there were independent stories that maybe the same thing, that as above, so below, the reflections of the stars and the precession of the equinox manifesting in the physical in the world, right? What do you feel? Do you feel that there was one original story and everything was taken from it? Or do you think that this genetic manipulation with different races has happened many times over the eons?
I think that we are in a situation where the Anunnaki arrived here, or this Atlantean culture arrived here at the time that we fell. I believe that our former human cousins were here and had risen and fallen 4 times, just like the Mayans said, to high levels of civilization on our own. And I believe that the Anunnaki arrived on this planet at a time where we had already fallen again in terms of technology, for whatever reason, whether it was war, whether it was a geological disaster.
Perfect infiltration.
Right. They arrived at a perfect time in our history, and they were able to masquerade as gods and utilize that against us.
What is the timeline we're looking at?
450,000 years ago, they arrived here. They then mined this planet and worked and lived on this planet along with us and along with other humanoids that were already here, including the Ubaid culture, which was more reptilian. They found those statuettes already in Iraq. And then around 200,000 years into it is when they began infighting, and some of the working class Ijiji Anunnaki began to want to have a coup against the rulers. And that's when the decision was made to genetically modify an existing hominid. They could have gone with AI technology, kind of alludes to that type of wording, but they knew that that could be dangerous for them as competitors, because they had a few of them already working in the medical labs, but I feel that they thought that maybe AI, as we now are finding out, could be extremely dangerous if you turn Skynet on. At some point, they could realize that human beings are not even needed anymore. So they decided to create a worker slave that they can manipulate and they can use, and that's unfortunately us.
The Ajiji aren't talked about enough. We heard about the Anunnaki, those from heavens come to earth. When I first got into the scriptures, I was listening to Jordan Maxwell, right? And he had the sons of God. It was all about the Ajiji. Who are the Ajiji, and what did they represent? What did they do on this planet?
The Ajiji are the working class Anunnaki. Now, they weren't slaves, but they were kind of treated as slaves. Most of them were sent to Mars to work on Mars, and they were complaining about the atmosphere. They were complaining about conditions there. Mars was already kind of a scarred planet. It was and still even is now, a livable planet. It used to be a moon. It was a moon of Tiamat before Tiamat exploded and turned into the asteroid belt. Now, these Ijiji, they are the ones spoken about in the Old Testament that basically fell to earth is when they came to earth and they took women as their wives. They had no women, they had nothing. They were just working with no women, no vacations, no breaks, and the workload was getting heavier and heavier, and the conditions were getting worse and worse. And that's when they decided, we had enough. And so this was a class of people, more like a working class of people that I don't know if they volunteered to come along with the Pantheon, or if they were forced to come, but at some point they got fed up with everything.
Were they the same race as the Anunnaki, or a different kind of demigod like Zeus compared to Hercules?
I believe that they were a different race. And when you start looking into these tablets, you start to realize that these Anunnaki might have been a multiracial group of beings, not just all from this Nibiru place.
Multiple extraterrestrial races?
Right, multiple extraterrestrial races. There's even one passage that kind of alludes to one of the Anunnaki marrying somebody from another planet. So you start to look into this and you start going, wow, this may have been a multicultural race of people. And when you look at the Emerald Tablets, which I wrote about, where Thoth is sent here by his dad, or sent to the land of Khem by his dad, to raise them back to a high level of civilization because of the flood just happened, all of a sudden he's talking about his crew spreading out all over the planet and actually duplicating what they did in the land of Khem. And then all of a sudden you start to see these megalithic structures and these pyramids all over the world. So they became a global civilization again. But what's interesting is you have people all over the world in these areas that then possibly took on the genetic marker of their new ruler or king who started that civilization, which hence could be the reason for having different races on this planet. Races, in my opinion, after doing a lot of research on biology, have nothing to do with I'm dark because my people are from the sunny area, and that's all. The real genetics talks about almost 2% variance between a Caucasian a black man, a Native American, an Indian, a Chinese person. There's a variance there. It doesn't mean that we're not all one, because we're still a race, a human race. But what it does mean is on a genetic level, just through pure evolution, virtually impossible in the short amount of time we've been here for us to have that variance. That variance was a purposeful one. It was done in a laboratory.
Yeah.
And it could be a mark of, okay, these are my people, these are my people, these are my people. This is the regions that they're in, and they raise up these megalithic structures all over these geological node points, or these magnetic points around the planet.
So the Ajiji, were the Anunnaki all negative, all positive, and were the Ajiji either of that either?
It was they're just like us, so we're just like them. They were good people and bad people, good Ajiji, good Anunnaki, bad, and so forth. Some really loved us. Some actually risked losing their ability to even go back to their home world by marrying human beings, taking them as wives, and decided even some to stay here just because of that, because they fell in love with humans. And some tried to help, like Thoth the Atlantean. He literally wanted to help us raise our consciousness to a higher level. And why I respect him is because he never masqueraded as a god. He always said that he was a son of Atlantis, or a child of the sun, and he never said, "I'm your god and you do what I say," and so forth and so on. He was deified long after he left a certain area. He left an area, he became then deified, and that's how he became called a god. But he never masqueraded as a god.
Right. If you track human history from fallen angels, the Ajiji, there have also been scriptures out there that talk about the Anunnaki staying in the heavens, where the Ajiji were the slave drivers, or what do you want to ever call them. They were doing the work down here. So were the Ajiji, did the Anunnaki leave and go home, and were the Ajiji left here? And is the Ajiji the bloodline that became the elite in the Cabal in the world?
I believe so. After the last Pyramid War, where Amun-Ra was the one who instigated it again, he escaped. But what happened was there was a nuclear war, most likely, and a lot of evidence of this nuclear war has been left all around the planet, where you have vitrified buildings, sand being vitrified in the Middle East. You have Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. Buildings are vitrified, dead bodies still laying in the street with high levels of radiation in them until this very day, not even touched by scavenging animals. So I believe that at that time, there was a war, and a lot of them left, but some of these working class Ijiji people stayed here. They already had wives and families and bloodlines and everything else, probably even leading to the Merovingian bloodline, which would have led to Yeshua, who some people call Jesus. So I believe that the bloodline stayed, and when you really track these bloodlines and track it all the way back from the Sumerian Kings list at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England, you discover that some of these Anunnaki people were ruling the earth for 28, 14, 15, 20,000 years. It ended up being over 140,000 years, but then you track that bloodline, it leads after the Great Flood into a half human, half Anunnaki bloodline that they had, which was like the kingship or the pharaonic bloodline. And then you track that after Alexander the Great conquers Egypt, far in the future from that point. These pharaohs and their bloodlines start basically migrating towards Europe. And across that time, they're mating with Arabs, they're mating with people from the Caucasus Mountains and so forth. They end up in England, they start another kingdom there. They become mostly Caucasian by this time, but their lineage goes all the way back to that Sumerian Kings list. From there, you can track it all the way into the future, into the current day where we're at now, with the presidents of the United States all being directly related to that same exact bloodline, all cousins, genetically proven on the genealogies, many genealogy sites, and also even admitted by most of the presidents, current presidents themselves, including Obama's already admitted, Bush, Trump, Clinton.
Yeah.
It's even Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are actual cousins. They're like eighth cousins. And so forth. Bill Clinton is a cousin of Hillary Clinton. Obama and Bush are cousins. So it just goes way back, and it just shows you that no matter who wins the presidency of the United States, they always win, because they have dogs on both sides, basically. And so no matter which one wins, they always win. They meaning the people that really run this planet.
And it makes you wonder. From birth, these people have to be conditioned to become our leaders. From before birth, from like thousands of years. The plan has to have been over thousands of years, but we live for such a short period of time that we forget, right? And the new generation doesn't care about the problems of the old generation because we have too much now. It's been a really well-constructed system to keep us enslaved, if you want to call it that, right? Were the Ijiji, so if before the Great Flood, was the bloodline pure, and after the Great Flood, you said it became half human, half Anunnaki, so it changed right after that, but it was pure before?
Yeah, before the flood, it was pure bloodline, kingship. After the Great Flood, a decision was made to hand over kingship to humans, but not just humans in direct. You'd have to have a contact or a person in the middle, and that middle person would be half human and half Anunnaki or half Atlantean, whatever you want to call it. So that's how they maintain that bloodline, a little bit of control there. And these people that are ruling this planet, if you ask them, they truly believe that they were designed and born and bred to rule over everybody on the planet, to own us and rule over us and tell us what to do and control us. Rothschild, Rockefeller, all these people are, in their mind, that's their reality. That's what they feel.
Yeah. Even the Ijiji, who were the working class that were treated almost like slaves by their overlords, came here, and instead of being like, no, I don't like this, they started doing the exact same thing. And even if some of them were good people that were just on this planet getting mating with, you know, daughters of men, over time it seems they created this systematic control of power. And power obviously creates more power, and once you have some, after thousands of years, it makes sense that they would be at the level of complete delusion of power that they are right now. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, what happens is you get a God complex. And when you start ruling and controlling people in a way and telling people that you're a God over time, you truly start to believe it.
Yeah.
This happens in current day times right now with people that live here, you know, that are running countries. You start to get a God complex, and they actually got a God complex. They had so much superior technology over us. They had a much better understanding of the ether of space-time itself, how to manipulate frequencies and how to manipulate matter. So they were so far in advance. And plus, this was like a wild, wild west for them. They had no real laws here keeping them in check. So when they sort of, at first, they would combat each other as to, is this ethical to do or is this not ethical to do? And then later on, you start to see it was just like, whatever goes, you know, it's like, just do whatever.
Right.
And it was
they got used to the fact that there was no oversight.
Exactly, no oversight. When they got used to it, they just went crazy. I mean, they literally just went completely off the ranch.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for us, it put us in the jackpot, and there was nothing we can do because we didn't have the understanding or the technology to combat them. We had the numbers. So what they did was, since we used to live for a very long time before they even got here, we, at the Tower of Babel incident, we were actually building a tower. Now, whether that was a cargo cult and we were mimicking something we saw them build, or we literally had become technologically advanced enough to build something, it literally threatened their power. And Enlil, who's known as Yahweh in the Bible, but the Bible just stole that story from the ancient Sumerian tablets. He's Enlil, the brother of Enki. He sees this tower, he gets extremely disgusted, and he knocks this tower down. Not only does he knock the tower down, this is when I knew as a kid when I read this that wasn't talking about the God of the universe, because it didn't make sense that people were working together and then this God who created a universe would come back and destroy something that people worked together to build. Then he says something very interesting. He says, my seed shall not abide in man forever, his years shall be 120. Well, scientists at Harvard just discovered under the most pristine conditions, a human being should live to 120 years. Well, why is this? The telomere caps on chromosome number 2, which they have now peer-reviewed science tells us that this cap was put there on this chromosome, and it forces us to live that long. And only what happens is the genetic material inside these telomeres starts to disappear over time as your cells and DNA replicate. It's like a buffer material. They discovered a way to stop this buffer material from disappearing from these telomeres, and they've extended the life of mice 2 to 3 times.
Wow.
Which means they can do it in humans now, which is now crucial for us, because if we don't take back control of this planet, they're going to start selling us time.
Selling us time. What does that mean?
Well, do you want to live to 150?
I'll live to 500.
It's going to cost you.
Wow.
It's going to cost you a million credits. You want to live to 150? It's going to
Makes sense.
Yeah.
They got the technology, and this is a good way to put it out, through capitalism, one product line at a time, right?
Exactly.
Maybe in 100 years they'll come out with a 300-year capsule.
There you go.
Right. So this brings us up to the question that you don't need a higher level of consciousness to have supreme advanced technology, because these individuals didn't seem that they had compassion, service to others, right? Some of them maybe did, but for the most part, obviously we're a product of what had happened with them. But they had high advanced technology. What is the difference between conscious technology and what we're creating compared to what they did?
Well, what I think is that in order to get to a level that they had achieved, you have to become extremely conscious. So all civilizations, according to the Yugas, have a rise and a fall. So at some point, their civilization had risen into a golden age. They got to a golden age, and then some of them broke away and had a breakaway civilization where they were strip mining probably asteroids and planets for resources for whatever reason they was doing it for. But we ourselves are looking to strip mine meteors right now, and we'd love to strip mine other planets as well, including our own moon for helium-3. So if we would do it, why wouldn't they do it? We're not even close to them. So They had the breakaway. Now, during the breakaway civilization stage, again, they have no oversight. So all these other thoughts start to come in, and you start to get this God type of a conscious. So you think you're a God for real, and you're ruling over people, and you're making decisions with no oversight, and you're breaking every fundamental law that your civilization has already put in place, and there's nobody to stop you. So now here comes the decline of that consciousness, but the technology already exists. So that's why you see them getting to this state.
That's very interesting, because we've been going through the cycles of time here for quite some time. 26,000 cycles could have lasted millions of years. We're only finding Atlantis now, which was probably one of the last great civilizations, yet it's still being considered myth, and some people are trying to debunk it. So just imagine about all the civilizations that existed on this planet that completely wiped out. So it's interesting that we were in a situation where we wiped ourselves out, so we lost a lot of this technology. So other civilizations could have left, maintained what they had so they didn't destroy themselves, and then just use the technology for thousands of years.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly what I feel happened. And that's how, because at first I was like, man, these Anunnaki are such warring, aggressive people. How can they even get to this level? But then I realized cycles of civilizations. And I believe that that's a universal type of a law where civilizations rise and fall all over. And when I read the Emerald Tablets, Thoth talks about going to other planets and watching civilizations rise and fall. And I said, that's it. That's the answer.
So how does this connect to monotheism? Because in Sumerian scripture, in Hindu Mahabharata, even though I consider them still monotheistic because truly they go back to one source, one God, in even the Hindu scriptures, the Yahweh was part of this, came from the Sumerian scriptures, right? However, they chose one God and decided that there was only one God. How did that even happen in the first place?
Well, you see, they had the Elohim, which is plural for gods. And these Elohim, or these Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them, they all were not even close to being the creator of the universe. But they themselves had somebody they called the creator of all. So they believed in a one God at some point. But they masqueraded as gods, and Amun-Ra, who took over kingship of ancient Kim or Egypt in the age of Pisces, which is why a lot of Christians have that fish on the back of their car. They don't realize that it's really from the Amun-Ra kingship. But he ordered that there only be one God, and it be him. He got tired of going back and forth and sharing the honor, or you want to call it, with his cousins and his nephews and everybody else who were already ruling different areas around the planet. And he's the one who decreed that at the end of every prayer, you give thanks to me, Amun-Ra. So that's where the amen comes from. When you say amen, you're giving thanks to one of the most brutal rulers of all time. He took over power via war early, because the age of Pisces hadn't even arrived yet. So he kind of bullied his way in. They finally let him have it. And then this guy just told evil. So he actually told Akhenaten, he's the sun disk for Akhenaten, that I want to usher in this monotheistic type of a society to go around and deface all the gods except me. So this is where Akhenaten began to become infamous by going around defacing all of the other gods, erasing hieroglyphs, like literally chipping them out and erasing their actual history, which pissed everybody off, which is why they wanted to get rid of this guy. But it was to usher in monotheism. A lot of people believe that, well, unfortunately, a lot of African American people believe that these faces and these noses were all chipped off because Europeans didn't want everybody to know that some of these people were black, but that's not the case. When you really dig into the history, you discover that Amun-Ra is the one who ordered these faces to be chipped and defaced and noses broken and everything else. In other words, to take away their power that they had over people by the way they physically looked in these glyphs. That, in other words, if the god can be wiped away on a slab of granite, you only to look to one, the one that's left, and that was the sun disk, or the sun god Amun-Ra.
Was Akhenaten and Amun-Ra having physical communication with each other, or was it some astral interdimensional?
I think they were having physical communication. I think there were a lot of Anunnaki communicating directly with pharaohs and people on this planet through the stelas. The stelas were known to give off sound and voices, I believe because they're made of crystal granite. Crystal is a receiver of radio frequencies. And it'd be very easy for me to transmit a frequency into a crystal receiver and have a voice come out of it. So it wasn't magic and it wasn't mystical. It was real technology being used to communicate back and forth with pharaohs and kings.
What's your take on mainstream archaeology and what they're attempting to convey? I just listened to George Knapp show the other day, and George was saying he decided to have a mainstream archaeologist on there in order for him to convey what they believe, because he wanted both sides. Everything that I heard was kind of nonsensical. It was choosing one. Oh, this case on this giant does not exist because I proved this wrong. Therefore, ad hominem. None of them exist, right? So what's your take on them? What would you say to those archaeologists?
The mainstream archaeologists are, unfortunately, they're puppets. They're trying to do one thing, and that's maintain their way of living, maintain their income, maintain their grants, their nonprofit status, and so forth. So what they've got to do is they've got to go with the overlords, whatever the overlords tell them they're allowed to say. If they go against that, they can risk losing their house, their car payments, and everything else. They won't get any money. They won't have any money for their projects. They won't be able to travel and do their stuff. So unfortunately, they've kind of sold themselves out in a way because they haven't found a way to generate their own revenue so that they can do real research. Everything that they're talking about is really nonsensical. They make up theories that become almost like doctrine, and it spreads through the whole society, and people take it as fact when it's actually fiction. And then they cover up a lot of stuff for the powers that be. They sweep stuff under the rug. They hide information. They destroy evidence. So they're really doing this planet and the human beings on this planet a disservice. I liken them to, people that underlings that are just working for some overlords. Personally, I hate to put them down like that, but that's what they're doing. When you do that kind of stuff, you're undermining the human race.
And a lot of them completely feel that they are speaking truth. The best way to get people to tell you a lie is to have them convinced that they're telling you the truth, right? Yep. So it's really interesting because there's not too many of us that believe this. There's a lot, and obviously we're connecting with them all the time, like Facebook everywhere. But there's not the consensus of the world really isn't into this information. So it's so interesting to observe that they are literally delusional, right? Yeah. The information is out there, but the duality of it all is that the ones that know the truth are being considered delusional, right? What do you feel? Do you feel that this is going to change the world very soon, that we have hope in having our history books rewritten? How are we going to get those in charge to allow at least for this information to come out, or are they going to just lose power and it's going to come out that way?
Well, nothing lasts forever. So all kingdoms rise and fall. Right now, we're living directly in the new Rome, which is America, and this kingdom itself will fall at some point. And all it takes is for a critical mass amount of conscious people on this planet to get to a point where 30, 40 million people can wake up one day and go, we're going to say no. No to everything. We're going to say no to paying our mortgage payment. We're going to say no to keeping our money in your banks. We're going to say no to buying gas. We're going to say no to everything. We're not going to show up for work. And when 20 to 30 million, maybe 40 million people do that all in the same day, the entire system will collapse and be reorganized. We have to get to that point. I think we're a little ways off from being at that point. It won't be a revolution of a war where people are fighting against military and so forth. It's going to be a revolution of consciousness where people literally do one thing, just say no. And when people come together in the millions and say no all at the same exact time, this planet is going to change for the better, and then we'll begin to see a lot of things move, positive changes for the human race itself.
We have power in numbers, and together we're going to make this change. And one by one, we're all waking up. And a lot of people, some I've seen go back to, where they were before, or some fundamentalists. But a lot of people are waking up and not going back to it, and we're teaching our kids. So it's inevitable, right? The cycles of time are true. You look at the science behind it all, we can see that we're evolving. We've had these cycles, and that we are going up on the precipice. How we get there, all the chaos, it's up to us, right? It's all our perspective, right? So I love you, bro, for everything that you do. You're an amazing person. I truly am inspired by the information you share. And I just want to say that just keep doing it, man. And we're going to be doing this together. It's going to be a great journey together, bro. So thank you for everything you do, Billy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. This is Neil with the Portal to Ascension Conference here with Billy Carson, a.k.a. Forbidden Knowledge. Check him out on Instagram. Okay, love you all. Peace.
Fire, most I Yo, the living fire, yo, me never have no fear. Go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Yo, Bingy man go and chant. And the highest grade of weed, you know we want. Alright. Give me a chalice load. Pass me the weed board. When me burn it off, knock it out, give me a reload. Weed man from Senti, always have it plenty. 24/7 black pearl coach, never empty. It make me pants, it make me shirt, it make me shoes. When me boil me tea in the morning, now it me use. You know, say this I wanna make the 7 o'clock news. Babylon face I get bruised. Yo, go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Now you been given go and chant. And the highest grade of weed, you know we want. Yes, farmer man go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Yes, big man go and chant. And the highest grade of herb, you know we want. Alright. Helicopter of the air, police are shoot through the square. I will go in farmer with Babylon here. Me little weed feel them one fi carrel and tear. The living fire never have no fear. Yo, go and plant. And the highest grade of herb, you know we want. Now you big man go and chant. And more marijuana we want. Yo, farmer man go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Now you big man go and chant. And the highest grade of weed, you know we want. Alright. Give me a chalice load. Pass me the weed board. When me burn it off, knock it out, give me a reload. Weed man from Senti, always have it plenty. 24/7 fire stick, coach, never empty. It make me pants, it make me shirt, it make me shoes. When me boil me tea in the morning, now it me use. You know, say this I wanna make the 7 o'clock news. Babylon face I get bruised. Yo, go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Now you big man go and chant. And the highest grade of herb, you know we want. Yes, farmer man go and plant. And more marijuana we want. Now you big man go and chant. And the highest grade of herb, you know we want.
Yeah, herbalist, smoke all day. Woo. Let music keep on playing. Wow. Sometimes the things you need in life may be difficult. Not all the time it's gonna be easy. I saw it go. Smoke the marijuana and get high. Stay above the wickeds and fly. I'm feeling so very good about myself. Babylon ain't feeling good, damn. That's their problem. I smoke the marijuana and get high. Stay above the wickeds and fly. And when I got problem at home domestically, and my girl she just wanna